Let's just solve some equations using the quadratic formula. So we're going to be practicing a little bit more. So let's say if we have x squared plus 4x minus 4 is equal to 0. One way we can solve this is we can use the quadratic formula, which states that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, all these letters represent the coefficient of our terms. So in this case, right, you can think about this as 1 times x squared plus 4 times x minus 4, okay? Now these coefficients correspond to the a, b, and c term. So in this case, our c term is negative 4, our b term is going to be 4, and our a term is just going to be 1. So we just plug this into our formula. So x is going to be equal to negative b, so negative 4, plus or minus the square root of 4 squared, which is 16, minus 4 times ac. So 4 times a is 1, times c, which is negative 4. And then all of this is going to be divided by 2a. 2 times 1 is just 2. So now we can just simplify this a little bit. So alright, so 4 times 1 is just 4. Negative 4, that's going to create 16, right? Because two negatives make a positive, right? So 16 plus 16 gives us 32. So we're going to have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 32 divided by 2. Let's see if we can simplify this any further. So the square root of 32, we can rewrite this as the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. As long as the things in the square root multiply out to be the number in this case, so in this case 16 times 2 gives us 32, right? So as long as the numbers inside our square roots multiply out to be the same thing, you can actually split the square root into 2 parts, or even more parts. Now we know that the square root of 16 is just 4. So we can actually rewrite the square root of 32 as 4 radical 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this up into 2 fractions. So, I mean, if we have, let's say, 1 plus 1 divided by 2, I can split this up into 2 fractions. I can be like, this is 1/2 plus 1/2, right? Either way, the answer to this is going to be equal to 1, right? But notice how I'm able to split up the fraction if I have the same denominator. Well, I can do the same case here. Both of these terms right over here, and they have the same denominator. So I'm going to split it up into 2 fractions. So I'm going to get x is equal to negative 4 over 2. So I'm splitting this one into a fraction, plus or minus 4 square root of 2 divided by 2, right? Split this up into 2 fractions. Negative 4 divided by 2 is going to be negative 2. 4 divided by 2 is just going to be 2. So I get x is equal to plus or minus 2 radical 2. So that is what we're going to do. First, we have to identify our a, b, and c terms. So in this case, our a term is going to be equal to 1, our b term is going to be equal to 30, and our c term is going to be equal to negative 10, right? So they just represent the coefficients of the x squared, x, and then the constant term, so the term without the x. And let's just plug it into the formula. So x is going to be equal to negative 30 plus or minus the square root of 30 squared, that's 900, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 10, all over 2a, which is 2. Let's simplify this a little bit. So negative 4 times negative 10 gives us 40, plus 40. So it's the same thing as 900 plus 40. So we have negative 30. It's going to be equal to negative 30 plus or minus the square root of 940 divided by 2. Now, how can I break up 940? So let me actually do this. I actually don't know, but all right, so we have 2. This is equal to 2 times 470. This is going to be equal to 2 times 235. This is going to be equal to 5. Let me see. 7. I can't break this up any further, so okay. So that means that, all right. So that means that I got that 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 7 times 5. No, wait, what? So, because the last term here ends with a 5, so let me see. So if I have 235 divided by 5, I'm going to get 420. So I'm going to get 47. Can I break up 47 any further? Is 47 a prime? I'm pretty sure 47 is a prime. So basically what I did, if you have like if you have like, I don't know, a calculator or something, probably do this like really quickly. But basically, what I was doing here is I basically broke 940 up into its individual parts. So 940 is actually equal to 2 times 2 times 47 times 5. So that means that the square root of 940 is equal to, so that means if I have the square root of 940, it's going to be equal to the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 47 times the square root of 5. Remember, if the things inside the square root all multiply up to what it originally was, then, it's equal to one another. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just going to be, that's just going to be equal to 2. So I'm going to rewrite this as negative 30 plus or minus, so I have 2 on the outside, and then on the inside I have square root of 47 times the square root of 5, which we know is equal to the square root of 235, right? Because, 47 times 5, 235, all divided by 2. I split this up into 2 fractions, so I get negative 30 over 2 plus or minus 2. The 2's cancel out. Negative 30 divided by 2 is negative 15. So I get negative 15 plus or minus the square root of 235. And that's going to be my answer. Alright, whatever. I'm just going to move it. So we have x squared plus 6x plus 10 is equal to negative 2. How do I solve this one? Well, what I can do is, first of all, I'm going to have to move everything to one side. Notice how when we're doing the quadratic equations, the other side is always equal to 0. Okay? So whenever you're dealing with these types of problems, make sure that one of your side is 0 and then the other side is filled with your stuff. So we're going to have x squared plus 6x plus 12 is equal to 0. Our a term is going to be equal to 1. Our b term is going to be equal to 6. C term is 12, quadratic formula time. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1. 4 times 1 is just 4, so I'm just going to write that down. 4 times 1 is 4, and then times 12, which is our c term, right? 4ac, all over 2a, which 2 times 1 is just 2. 4 times 12 is just going to be 4 times 12 is going to be 48. 36 minus 48 is going to be negative 12. So I'm going to get x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 12 over 2. What do I do now? Now, if your teacher didn't teach you about I, yet, well, I'm pretty sure if your teacher allows you to, be sure to ask them this, but you could say there's no solution, you could say there's no real solution as one of your answer. Because the thing is, you can't have a square root of a negative number, okay? So whenever you're doing the quadratic formula, there's actually, whenever you're doing the quadratic formula, right, you notice how you have this square root part. So the thing inside the square root, I'm just going to highlight it, is b squared minus 4ac. Okay? So that's the thing inside our square root for the quadratic formula, right? Now, if whatever this is less than 0, for example, if it's negative 1, negative 2, well, then there's no real solution to your quadratic equation. All right? So if whatever you have inside the square root is negative, you're going to have no real solution, because you can't take the square root of a negative number. Right? You can't try to find two numbers two of the same numbers that multiply together to be equal to -1. If you said -1, well, nope. -1 times -1, right? The negatives cancel out, so you just get 1. So there's actually no real numbers. There's no real numbers that give you -1. So that means, when they're multiplied together, so that means, you can't really have a square root of a negative number, meaning there's no real solution. That's one of the things that gotta know. But if your teacher did, introduce you to I, then watch this part. So you're gonna have x is equal to -6 plus or minus. Okay, so the square root of -12. Let me focus on this part. So the square root of -12 is equal to the square root of 12 times the square root of -1. And the square root of -1 is equal to I. Now, okay, all right. Now I'm assuming y'all know what I is, okay? So if you guys don't know what I is, feel free to watch this video, or, if your teacher allows you to write no real solution, then, don't watch this part of the video. Okay, the square root of 12, that's the same thing as 4 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3, so it's just going to be 2 radical 3. So that means I can write this as -6 plus or minus 2 radical 3 I, right? 2 radical 3 times I, all divided by 2, right? Don't forget, all divided by 2. If I separate this into two fractions, this -3, right? -6 divided by 2 is -3. 2's cancel out. I get x is equal to -3 plus or minus square root of 3I times I. And, or you can write it as I root 3. All right. Either way, the answer is the same because you're multiplying the radical 3 times I. So yeah, there we go.